All right, so we are going to be talking about congruent triangles or congruent figures in general today. We talked about congruency earlier this year, and in order for two things to be congruent, they had to have two of the same things. They had to be exactly the same size and exactly the same shape. Okay, in order for them to be congruent, they have to be exactly the same size and exactly the same shape. In two congruent polygons, okay, a triangle is considered a polygon. All of the parts of one polygon are congruent to what we call the corresponding parts. Or the matching parts, the parts that are in the same position. That's what corresponding means. They're in exactly the same position in each figure, okay? Then, I missed what I was saying. In two congruent polygons, all of the parts of one polygon are congruent to the corresponding parts or the matching parts of the other polygon. These corresponding parts include corresponding angles, so angles that are in the same position, and corresponding sides, so sides that are also in the same position. Okay, so if I have this triangle congruent to that triangle, then the angles that are in the same position are equal to each other, and the side lengths that are in the same positions are equal to each other. Everybody okay with that? So when we're talking about the interior angles of a triangle, sorry, we're going to say that two triangles are congruent if and only if their interior angles are congruent. And then we've got several words to fill in. And we're going to use this saying in proofs sometimes. But for triangles, we say that corresponding parts, if I can get my pen to write, corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, so all of this is a part of it. I just didn't have you write it all down. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. That's a lot of words to write, especially when we get to our proofs. So this is what we can call it. We're going to abbreviate it. It is called CPCTC. Okay? Corresponding parts, congruent triangles, congruent. That's what that means. CPCTC. Corresponding parts, congruent triangles, congruent. That's the abbreviation for it. And again, we'll use that a little bit later in our proofs in the next few days. Is everybody ready? The first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be given some pictures of polygons, and they're going to have their congruent markings on them. What we're going to do is we're going to list which pairs of angles are congruent and which pairs of sides are congruent. Everybody ready? All right, so first let's start with the angles. Looking in my picture, you can see your little markings, your little curves. The difference between one curve, two curves, and three curves is differentiating which angles match up. So let's start with A. How many curves does A have? In the little corner there, in the angle, how many does it have? It just has one, right? So we're going to say angle A is congruent to what angle has the exact same marking in the other picture? W. So angle A is going to be congruent to angle W, if I can write. Does that make sense? You're just looking at the markings. You're picking the two pairs or the two angles that have exactly the same markings, A and W. If you look at the little curves right here, that's what I'm talking about, this little curve right here, okay? So looking at the figure that has A, B, C, and D in it, which angle has two curves? Angle B, okay? And that's going to be congruent to what angle in the other figure has two curves? X, okay. Oops. Then let's go to three curves. In the first one on the left, which one has three curves? So we're going to say angle C, maybe, is congruent to what angle? Yep. My goodness. And then the last angle, angle D, is going to be congruent to what angle in the other picture? Z. Angle Z. Okay. Make sure you put your angle symbols in front of them so that I know that you're referring to the angles. Okay, so we've got half of this done. Well, a third. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to list which pairs of sides are congruent. Okay, the congruent markings on the sides are little straight little dashes. 1 goes with 1, 2 goes with 2, 3 goes with 3, 4 goes with 4. So on the left side, what segment has one little hash on it? BC. Okay, remember we name a segment with a little bar over it. And that is going to be congruent to, which one has one marking in the other picture? Y, X, X, Y. It doesn't matter the order of the letters as long as you have those same two letters and put the segment bar above it. Everybody okay with that? Now let's go to the side in the left picture that has two hashes on it. What's that called? BA or AB, it doesn't matter which the order is going to be congruent to XW, same markings on the other triangle, or not triangle, polygon, sorry. Which segment has three hashes on it on the left side? AD. And that is going to be congruent to which one has three on the other side? ZW. Anybody have any questions so far? All right, we got one more pair of sides. What's the side on the left that has four hashes? CD. And that's going to be congruent to which one has four on the other side? I see. So when it asks for corresponding parts, we list the congruent angles, and then we list the congruent sides. What else does it ask me for? It says, then write what? Read in your paper. What does it say? Then write a congruency statement, okay? So this congruent statement, this is what we're going to do. You have to list the corresponding parts in the same order. Okay, so let me ask you this. How do you want to name that one, the ABCD? How do you want to name that? You have to pick one corner and go clockwise around it. So where do you want to start? Which angle do you want to start with in that picture? A, okay. Then we're going to have to go around the picture clockwise. That means this way. Think about the way clock goes. So what would come next? What'd you say? B. Yeah. So we go A, and then B, and then what next? C, and then D. So we're going to start at A, and we're just going to work our way around. So A, B, C, D is congruent to. We have to name the other polygon with the exact same angles matching up. What did we say was the same as A? So that has to go first. What did we say was the same as B? X. So that has to go second. What about the same as C? Okay, that has to go third. And then the same as D would be Z. Okay, so do you notice how focus on what angles we said were congruent here, and then look at how we listed them. A and W are both listed first because they're the same. B and X were listed second because they're the same. C whoops. C and Y were listed third because they're the same. And then D and Z were listed last, and they're the same. Does that make sense? Okay. I want you to do the next example. Do exactly what we just did. All right, let's start with our congruent angles. Top picture. Which one has one curve? P, okay. Is congruent to which one in the bottom picture has one curve? Okay. All right, and then for the two curves in the top picture would be Q, and two curves in the bottom picture is F. Three curves in the top picture, R. Three curves in the bottom picture is E. And then four curves in the top is S, and four curves in the bottom is D. All right, and then for sides, what pair of sides has one marking in the top? PQ. And then one marking in the bottom? GF, okay. All right, two markings would be top SP and bottom DG. What's the matter with the remaining sides? They all have three. So really, how many congruent sides am I going to have if two in each have the same markings? 4. All right, so it doesn't matter how we name these. Well, it kind of does. I really wish they wouldn't have done that. All right, let's look at QR. I have to name the side that matches that in the other triangle. And since the lengths of the sides are the same, we're going to have to look at our angles. How many curves does Q have? 2, okay? So that's the same thing as F down here. How many curves does R have? 3, and that's the same thing as E here, okay? So we need the side that's in between those. That yellow highlight, the QR at the top, is going to match what side's in between the two angles I highlighted in the bottom. This one, EF? Does that make sense? Okay. So when I name that, QR is going to have to be congruent to EF, and I promise I won't try to confuse y'all like this on the test. And then we have to name that last side that has 3 markings. So I'm going to focus on SR. Whoops. Try that one. So you have to make sure they're in between the same 2 angles. That's the only issue. If you look at SR, SR is in between the angle that has 4 curves and the angle that has 3 curves. So the side that matches that is going to be in between the 2 types of angles in the other triangle, which do have 2 and 3, 3 and 4 curves, D and E. Yeah, so these are going to match, right? So you have to do the side in between those. For purposes of this, it's okay. I'm not going to do this to you on a test. I'll make sure they all have separate things, okay? And then my congruency statement, I'm going to go off of my angles. Looking right down here, how would I name that first one? PQRS, okay, is going to be congruent to, how did I name the second one over here? GFED. Okay, all of your matching angles have to be listed in the same position. Is that kind of okay if that curveball hadn't been thrown there with the two pairs of sides having congruence? Okay. All right. What we want to look at for this next one is look at the congruency statement. What 2 triangles does it say are congruent here? RSV and TVS. So if we're looking just at the congruency statement, I haven't even looked at my pictures. All right, are we ready? What angle is in the same place as R in the other triangle? T. Okay. So that means angle R and angle T are congruent. What angle is in the same place as S in the second triangle? V. So angle S and V are congruent. And then what angle is in the same place as V in the second triangle? S. So V and S are congruent. So we're going to use that congruency statement to know what parts to set equal to each other. So let's first look at the picture if I could find it. There it is. Here's my recommendation. What I would suggest is, okay, let's look at it this way. Where is X in my picture? It's angle T, right? Right, angle T right here. So if I'm looking at my congruency statement, which angle did we say was the same as angle T? R. So, do I know angle R? Do I have the degrees there? Could I figure it out, though? Yeah. Let's look at this triangle right here. Okay, I'm going to rewrite it separately just so I can focus on it. This is R. This is S. This is V. That's marked here, and this one is 78. What does that little box mean? It's a right angle. So what we're going to have to do to find angle R is we're going to add our 90 degrees, our right angle, plus our 78 degrees. And then I'm going to subtract that from how much? How much do all angles of the triangle add up to be? 180. So what is angle R going to be? 12. So guess what X is going to be? Okay, so I had to figure out what angle was the same as T, and I did that by looking at that congruency statement. Now we're going to have to talk about Y. Everybody okay with how I found X? Okay. Do you see that X is angle T? Okay. So what we first have to figure out is which angle is exactly the same as T, and we do that from this congruency statement right here. Do you see how T is listed first? So the angle that's listed first in the other triangle is going to be exactly the same. Okay. So if I'm looking back at my picture, that means R and T are the same. Well, they didn't give me R, but they did give me this angle right here is 78, and that angle up there was 90. So I added those and subtracted from 180 to get R, which is the same as T. So that's how X is T. That follow along? Okay. All right, let me erase. And let's talk about what we need to try to figure out now. What is it asking me for? To find the value of Y. All right, so do you notice Y is what segment? RS. So what we have to figure out is which segment is the same as RS in my other triangle. So look back at your congruency statement. Okay, again, I'm looking right here. RS is the first two letters in the first triangle. So that means the segment that is listed in the same position in the other triangle is what it's congruent to. So what segment would it be congruent to? TV. So look back at your picture. What is TV labeled? 24. Okay, so those two are congruent. How did I know that? From that congruency statement. They have to be listed in the same position because RS was listed first right here. Then TV is what it's congruent to because it's listed first. So let's set up our equation then. What is 2y minus 1 going to equal? What are the two parts I have highlighted? 24. So I'm going to set 2y minus 1 equal to 24. I'm going to add 1, right? So 2y is going to equal 25. And then this is not going to go in evenly, so we'll get a decimal. And half of 25 is 12.5. Are we kind of okay with that? Somewhat, sort of, maybe. All right, let me see. Oof. All right, we're going to try this next example. We might have to hold off on the rest of this until tomorrow because we don't have that much time. So let's look at this next example. Okay, the top of the page. We might have to hold off on this last bit until tomorrow.
not do it then.
Huh? No, we're going to do this example because it's similar to what we just did. Everybody ready? All right, we are finding X and Y. So let's, first of all, make sure this right here, this statement tells me everything I need to know. It tells me which angles are congruent. It tells me which segments are congruent. So let's start with X. Where is X? It's segment AB, right? It's this segment. That segment right there at the top. So what we have to figure out is which segment is that congruent to in the other triangle. Looking at your congruency statement. AB is listed as the first two letters. What's listed as the first two letters in the other triangle? Whoops, yep, stop. All right, so let's go back to our picture. What is the value of ED? 20. So if I want to find X, tell me what my equation should be. There you go. Solve that for X. Add your 10 over. That gives me 3x equals how much? 30. So what is x going to be? 10. Okay. Oh, subtracting that. Is everybody good? All right, let's look at y. Y is an angle, yes? It is this angle right here, which means this angle is also the same because why? Why are they? They're vertical, right? Also, they're listed in the same spot in my triangles, but in this picture, they happen to be vertical. So, I don't have enough in the top picture. I only have my 90-degree angle. But in the bottom picture, do I have enough? Yes, I do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my two angles that they gave me. What two angles did they give me? In the bottom triangle. 90 and what? 36.87. Everybody does remember that that box is 90 degrees, yes? And then I'm going to do 180 minus the 126.87. And I cheated and used a calculator, okay? And that's going to give me 53.13. So guess what y equals? 53.13.